Prince Edward is a very important man who is part of the royal family in the United Kingdom. He has a very special title now that is called the Duke of Edinburgh. This title is very famous because it was held by his father for a very, very long time. His father was named Prince Philip, and he was the husband of the late Queen Elizabeth. Prince Philip was the Duke of Edinburgh for more than 70 whole years. That is a very long time for anyone to have a title. It was something he was very proud of. Because he loved his title and he loved his son, Prince Edward, Prince Philip had a very special wish. He really wanted Prince Edward to be given the title after he was gone. He thought Edward would do a great job with it. This was a very kind and meaningful wish from a father to his son, and many people hoped it would come true one day soon. It was a big goal for the family. For a very long time, the royal family had a set of rules that they always followed. These rules were very simple and everyone knew them. The main rule was that when a father had a title, he would pass it down to his son when he died. This is how things worked for hundreds and hundreds of years in England. It was a way to keep things the same and make sure everyone knew what was going to happen next. But in the last few years, those old rules have been changing quietly. People didn't talk about it out loud very much, but the rules were being broken. This has made things a little bit complicated and confusing inside the big royal house. It is like a puzzle where some of the pieces do not fit the same way they used to fit before. It is a very big change for a family that loves to follow old traditions. At the middle of this big story is Prince Edward. He's a member of the royal family who has a title that is a bit different from the others. Usually, a title goes from a father to a son, but Edward's title will not do that. When Edward is gone, his son will not get to be the Duke of Edinburgh. This is very unusual and different from how things normally go. There is also another title that both Edward and his son share, but they share it in a way that is not very common at all. It is like they are sharing a special name, but the rules for how they use it are very strange. This makes many people wonder what is going to happen in the future. They have a lot of questions about how these titles work and who will get them next. It is a very interesting situation that many people are watching closely. Because the old ways are changing, many people are looking at King Charles III. He is the leader now, and he is the one who makes the big decisions about names and titles. People want to know what his plans are for the future of the family. They wonder how he will decide who gets to be a duke and who does not. They ask themselves, how did we get to this point? And what is going to happen next? It is a story that has many parts and many secrets. We are going to look at the whole story together so you can understand it better. We will talk about how these decisions were made and why they matter so much. It is a story about a title that nobody thought he would pick. It shows us that even in a royal house, things can be very surprising and different from what we expect. If we look at the royal family, we can learn that the most interesting stories are not always what they seem at first. Sometimes you have to look deeper to find the truth. You have to look past the big announcements that the palace makes to everyone. You have to look at when things happen and how they are set up. You also have to look at the quiet choices that people make behind the scenes. These are the decisions that really matter even if they are not talked about on the news. To understand Prince Edward's story, we have to look at the little details that sit underneath the public words. This helps us see the real picture of what is going on with the titles and the family. It is like being a detective who is trying to solve a mystery about a very famous group of people in a big castle. This whole story really started a long time ago in the year 1999. That was the year when Prince Edward got married to a lady named Sophie Rhys-Jones. They had a beautiful wedding at a place called St. George's Chapel in Windsor. It was a very big day with lots of flowers and fancy clothes. At that time, everyone thought that Edward would become a duke. In the royal family, that is what usually happens when a prince gets married. It was a tradition that had been followed for a very long time. His older brothers had already become dukes when they got married, so everyone just assumed Edward would be the same. It seemed like the most natural thing in the world for a prince to get a big title on his wedding day. Everyone was waiting to hear what his new name would be because they were so sure it would happen. His older brothers had already received their big titles. Prince Charles had become the Prince of Wales and the Duke of Cornwall, which are very big names. His other brother, Prince Andrew, had become the Duke of York. Because of this, everyone thought it was Edward's turn to be a duke. It was not just a guess. It was what everyone expected to happen. In the royal family, being a duke is a way to show that you have a high rank and that you are an important part of the family history. It is a way to keep the family tree strong and growing. Everyone thought that the palace would announce a new dukedom for Edward as soon as the wedding was over. It was part of how everyone understood the rules of being a royal prince. It was like a rule that was written down even though it wasn't. But then the palace said something that surprised everyone. They announced that Edward would not be a duke at all. Instead, he would be called an earl. He was given the title of the Earl of Wessex. This was very strange because an earl is a lower rank than a duke. Nobody expected this to happen. Later on, some reports came out that explained why this choice was made. It is one of the most unusual stories in the history of the modern royal family. It turns out that Edward actually chose this title himself, but the reason he chose it was very funny and unexpected. It wasn't because of history or an old family name. It was because of something he had seen on a screen. People were very confused about why a prince would want a lower title like that for such a strange and unique reason. The story goes that Edward had seen a movie in 1998 called Shakespeare in Love. In that movie, there is a character named Lord Wessex. The character was played by a famous actor named Colin Firth. Edward liked the name of that character so much that he wanted it to be his own title. The idea that a royal title could come from a movie character was very, very strange to most people. Usually, these names come from history or from places in England that are very important. But Edward liked the way Wessex sounded. It was very different, and it stood out to everyone who heard about it. People began to talk about it a lot because it was so unusual for a future duke to pick a name based on a person in a play about a famous writer. It was a very modern thing to do in a very old family. This is not the kind of story that the palace usually tells people. They don't usually say that a title was picked because of a movie. But even though it is a funny detail, it is something that has been talked about for a long time. People have remembered this story for many years because it is so hard to believe. It is the kind of detail that is very hard to make up, so many people think it is true. Whether it was the only reason or just one small reason, the movie and the title will always be linked together. Every time someone hears the name Earl of Wessex, they might think of that movie and the character in it. It shows that even princes can be influenced by the things they watch and the stories they like, just like normal people are. It makes him seem a bit more like everyone else. So Edward became the Earl of Wessex, and his new wife Sophie became the Countess of Wessex. They were happy with their new names, but when this was announced, the palace also made a very important promise. They said that in the future, Edward would eventually get the title of the Duke of Edinburgh. This was the title that belonged to his father, Prince Philip. It is a very important title and one of the most respected names in the whole royal family, but the palace said he could not have it yet. He had to wait until his father was gone and until his mother, the Queen, was no longer on the throne. The promise was made, but nobody knew exactly when it would happen. It was something that would happen much later when the time was right. It was a plan for the far-off future. That wait lasted for 24 whole years. During those many years, Edward and Sophie worked very hard. They went to many events and helped many different charities. They were very busy, but they did not always get as much attention as some of the other royals. They were steady and they were always there to do their duty. They became a very important part of the family's work. Even though they were not always on the front page of the newspapers, they were doing a lot of good things for the country. All that time, the promise about the title was still there in the background. It was not forgotten, but it was waiting for the right moment to come. It was like a secret plan that everyone knew about but was not ready to use yet. They just kept working and waiting for the right day. Sadly, Prince Philip passed away in April of 2021. Then, just a little while later, Queen Elizabeth passed away in September of 2022. These were very sad times for the family and for the whole world, but it also meant that the time for the promise had finally come. On March 10th, 2023, which was Edward's 59th birthday, King Charles made it official. He gave the title of Duke of Edinburgh to his younger brother, Edward. This was a very special birthday present. Edward was finally a duke just like his father had been. His wife Sophie became a duchess. Their son, James, also got a new title. He became the Earl of Wessex. It seemed like everything was finally settled and the promise was kept. It was a very happy moment for them after waiting for so many years. It felt like things were right. But as soon as the new titles were given, some people who know a lot about laws started to ask questions. They noticed that the way the king gave the title to Edward was not the normal way. This is the reason why there is so much talk about it right now. The king gave the title to Edward as something called a life peerage. This is a very big and fancy term, but it means something very simple. Most people didn't notice this small detail, but it is the most important part of the story if you want to know what happens next. A life peerage is different from the titles that most royals have. It changes the way the title will be passed down in the future. It is a very specific legal choice that has a big impact on Edward's children and the generations that will come after them. A life peerage means that the title belongs only to the person it was given to. It is like a special gift that is just for them for as long as they are alive. It does not go to their children when they die. It is personal, not something that stays in the family forever. This means that when Edward is gone, his son James will not become the new Duke of Edinburgh. Instead, the title will go back to the king. It will stop existing for a little while until the king decides to give it to someone else. This is very different from the way titles usually work. Usually they are hereditary, which means they pass from a father to his son automatically. But this time, the rule was changed. This is a very big deal because it means the title stays with the crown instead of staying with Edward's family line. This is very different from the title of the Earl of Wessex. That title is hereditary. That means it follows the old rules. When Edward dies, the title of Earl of Wessex will go to his son, James. James will become the real Earl of Wessex in his own right. He will also get another title called the Earl of Forfar, which was given to Edward by Queen Elizabeth a few years ago. Both of those names will stay in their family for a long, long time. But the big title, the Duke of Edinburgh, will not stay with them. This creates a very strange situation where one family has two different kinds of titles. One title stays forever, and one title only lasts for one person's life. It is like having two different sets of rules happening in the same house at the very same time. Right now, in the year 2026, the situation is like this. Edward is both the Duke of Edinburgh and the Earl of Wessex. He holds two big names at once. One is just for his life, and the other is for his family to keep forever. His son James is using the title Earl of Wessex right now, but he is using it as a courtesy title. This means he is using it because his father is a duke, and it is a polite way to address the son of a duke. It is a very fancy way of being polite. This means both the father and the son are linked to the same name right now, but they are linked in different ways. The father owns it legally, and the son uses it because it is the custom. When Edward dies, James will own it legally. It is a very tidy but strange way to do things. This whole thing is a bit more complicated than it sounds. There is another layer to the story that many people do not know about. It has to do with a very old set of rules from the year 1917. Back then, King George V made some very important rules about who gets to be called His Royal Highness or Her Royal Highness. These are the titles like Prince and Princess. Under these rules, any grandchild of a king or queen through their sons is allowed to have those titles. This means that James, who is the grandson of Queen Elizabeth, is legally allowed to be called a prince. He could be called His Royal Highness Prince James of Edinburgh right now if he wanted to. He has always had the right to use that title, but he has chosen not to use it at all. Edward and Sophie made a very big choice when their children were born. They decided that they wanted their children to grow up as normally as possible. They did not want them to be called prince or princess while they were little. They wanted them to have a life that was more like other kids. Sophie once said in an interview that the children have the titles, but they can choose if they want to use them when they turn 18 years old. She said she thought it was very unlikely that they would ever want to use them. James turned 18 in December of 2025, and he did not start using the title. He stayed as he was. People who know the family say this is because he is a quiet person and he likes his life the way it is now. But even if James does not use the title, the law says he still has it. It is like having a key to a special room but choosing never to open the door. The key is still there. This is why the lawyers have to be very careful. When they write down the official records for Edward's titles, they cannot just ignore James. They have to acknowledge that he has these rights under the old laws. The law does not let them just forget about it. He exists in 3 different ways in the legal books. He is the courtesy Earl of Wessex. He is the future real Earl of Wessex. And he is a person who has the right to be a prince even if he doesn't use the name. This makes the legal work very, very precise and detailed for everyone who has to work on it. In the royal family, laws are very important. Most of the time, these things are simple because people either use their titles or they don't have them anymore. But James is in a very rare middle spot. Nothing has been taken away from him, but he hasn't started using anything either. Everything is just sitting there waiting. Legal experts call this an inactive entitlement. It means you have the right to something, but you are not using it. Even so, the people who keep the records for the king have to write it all down correctly. They don't just work with what people see on TV. They have to work with what the law says is possible. This is why the situation is so unique. It is not a fight or a problem. It is just a very complicated puzzle of laws and traditions that all have to work together. There's also a part of this story that many people missed. The title of Duke of Edinburgh almost didn't happen for Edward at all. When Prince Philip died, the title went to Charles because he was the oldest son. When Charles became king, the title became part of the crown again. This meant Charles could decide what to do with it. For a while, it looked like he might not give it to Edward. In 2021, a big newspaper said that Charles had decided not to give the title away. The palace didn't say the newspaper was wrong. People were very worried because Edward had been doing so much work for his father's charity. They thought he deserved the title because he was doing so much good work. It was a very tense time for people who follow the royal family and their stories. Many people felt that Edward was a very steady and reliable member of the family. He had been working hard for many years, especially with the Duke of Edinburgh's award, which was a very important project for his father. People thought that if he didn't get the title, it would be like breaking a tradition. There were also big discussions about what the title means for Scotland. The name Edinburgh is very important there. The palace had to think very carefully about how people in Scotland would feel about the decision. They had to look at politics and how things were changing in the country. It was not just a family decision. It was a decision that involved the whole United Kingdom and how people feel about their history and their future together. By the time 2023 came around, things had changed. The political situation was a bit quieter, and it felt like the right time to make a move. So, on Edward's birthday, the king finally gave him the title. But by making it a life peerage, the king was doing something very smart and very subtle. He kept the promise to his father and his brother, but he also made sure the title would come back to the king later on. This means the title doesn't just stay in one branch of the family forever. It was a way to reward Edward for his hard work while also keeping control of the title for the future. It was a choice that looked at the big picture of the whole monarchy. It was a very careful balance between the past and the future. The real reason the king chose a life peerage is very interesting. It is because of a conversation about making the royal family smaller and more modern. When Edward dies and the title goes back to the king, it doesn't just disappear. It waits for the next person. Many people who work at the palace believe the title is being saved for someone very special. That person is Princess Charlotte. She is the daughter of Prince William and the granddaughter of the king. She is very high up in the line to be the next queen after her father and brother. Giving her the title of Duchess of Edinburgh in the future would be a very big deal. It would be a way to honor the history of the family in a very beautiful and symbolic way. Imagine how special that would be. The title was first given to Prince Philip when he married the Queen. Then it went to Charles and then to Edward. If it goes to Charlotte one day, it would be back in the hands of a woman who will be a senior leader in the family. It would be a title that connects her to her great-grandfather and her great-grandmother. By making Edward's title a life peerage, King Charles made sure this could happen. If it were a hereditary title, it would have gone to James and his children, and Charlotte could never have it. This shows that the king is thinking many, many years ahead. He is making sure that the most important names are held by the people who will be at the very center of the royal family's future work. This is what people call a slimmed-down monarchy. It means the family is trying to have fewer people using big titles and doing royal work. It means titles are given for a specific reason and not just because someone was born into the family. It is a more modern way of doing things. But this story is also about how much Edward and Sophie have helped the family. Between 2020 and 2023, the royal family became much smaller. Prince Harry and Meghan moved away to live a different life. Prince Andrew also stopped doing royal work. This left a lot of work to be done, and there were not many people left to do it. Edward and Sophie were the ones who stepped up to help the king and the queen with all the extra duties and travel. Edward and Sophie did not complain about having more work to do. They did not do big interviews or ask for more money or more fame. They just did what they were asked to do. They went to more events, they traveled to more countries, and they helped keep everything running smoothly. People in the palace really appreciated how steady and reliable they were. Sophie especially got a lot of praise. People said she was very kind and very good at her job. She didn't try to be the center of attention. She just worked hard and stayed focused on helping others. Their consistency was very important during a time when many other things in the family were changing and sometimes felt a bit messy or stressful. They were like a calm spot in a storm. The title Edward got in 2023 was a way to say thank you for all those years of hard work. It was not given to him right away, and it was not an easy path to get there. He had to wait for more than 20 years. He had to deal with times when he wasn't sure if it would ever happen. But when he finally got the title, he just kept working like he always had. He didn't make a big scene about it. He and his family have always been very quiet and very humble. Even his children, Lady Louise and James, have lived very normal lives. Louise has been seen working at a garden center, and she goes to a regular university to study. They are not trying to be famous. They are just living their lives while being part of a very famous family. James is now 18 years old, and he still shows no interest in being a prince or a fancy royal. Even though the law says he could use a very big title, he likes being just James. He has grown up knowing he has the choice, and he has chosen to be quiet and normal. This is very different from some other people in the family's history. It shows that Edward and Sophie raised their kids to be independent and to think for themselves. They are not defined by their names or their status. In a world where many people want to be famous, their choice to be quiet and to work hard is very special. It reflects the way their parents have lived their lives too. It is a story of doing what is right instead of what is loud. So as we look at the future, the lawyers will keep working on the paperwork for the titles. They will make sure everything is recorded correctly for the history books. They will keep track of the Earldom of Wessex and the Dukedom of Edinburgh. None of it is a big emergency because Edward is still young and healthy, but it is good for them to have a plan. James will one day be an earl and live a life that is his own. The Duke of Edinburgh title will one day return to the king, and maybe we will see Princess Charlotte become the next Duchess. It is a long game that the royal family is playing. It is about keeping traditions alive while also changing to fit the modern world. It is a very interesting way to run a family and a country. What do you think about all of this? Do you think the Duke of Edinburgh title should go to Princess Charlotte one day? Do you think Edward and Sophie have done a good job being steady and helpful royals? They have worked very hard for a very long time without asking for much in return. It is interesting to see how their story has changed from a wedding in 1999 to a big new title in 2023. There's always something new to learn about the royal family and the way they handle their lives and their names. Thank you for following the story with us. It is a big story about a small group of people who have a very important job to do. We hope you enjoyed learning about the Duke and his family and their very unique titles. There is always more to discover.